Hello, everybody. Welcome to Need I Say More? My name is Giuseppe. That's Terrance.
Yes, sir.
Terrance, we got a special episode for everyone today.
Yes.
So
Need I say more? I mean,
exactly. So we what we were gonna do was we were gonna record special, female correspondent as we've been doing, but then we got to talking to Jaylynn, who you're gonna hear in a minute, and she's just endlessly fascinating. I mean, am I wrong about that?
yeah, we had a lot of fun having this conversation, and there was no way we were going to be able to fit it into one episode.
Yeah, we didn't want to cut it off, because it was a good conversation, and then we ended up recording a ton. So basically, the plan is what you're about to hear is the first half of what we recorded, and then next week, 1 week from this, when you're hearing this, I'm not sure when we're putting this out.
I think 1 week from when you're hearing this.
I think we're putting this out on April 3rd. So if that's the case, 1 week from then, April 10th is when you hear episode 2, part 2 of this, I should say.
Or just look for us on Twitter and we'll tweet the link.
Yes, you can follow us on Twitter at Need I Say More Pod, or you can email us at needisayMorePod@gmail.com.
Look how cohesive we are.
Yeah, I know, right? It's like almost like we planned all of this. But yeah, anyway, so what you're about to hear is just a kind of extended interview with Jaylynn, who is a sex worker. Very, very cool episode. I think you're gonna really dig it. That's about it, right, Terrance? Anything else?
No. Enjoy.
Yeah, enjoy. Hello.
Hello.
Hey.
Hi.
Welcome to the Need I Say More podcast. How are you?
Good. How are y'all doing today?
Good. My name is Giuseppe. You might know my friend Terrance.
I do know T. Hey, T.
What's up, Jay? How you doing?
T and J, known as names. What is your name? Can we have a brief? What is your name, and then just give like a description of you, I guess, just for all the people listening.
And why we kind of brought you on, because it's going to be super important.
Well, I mean, we brought her on because we want to talk to her.
Yeah, so my name is Jaylynn. I am a former dancer, I guess is the term that we're going to be discussing today. I actually prefer the word or the term sex worker, which we can talk about in more detail.
Oh, we're definitely gonna. Now I'm curious.
Later on in the show. I worked in New York, Baltimore, and Philadelphia.
Okay.
I am currently not working technically, but considering going back to work.
Is it COVID related as well?
COVID related?
No, it's not. It's more so just, leaving the lifestyle and having these ideals about saying things like, oh, well, once I leave, I'll never go back. And then finding yourself in a situation later in life where you're thinking to yourself, oh, actually, no, I may go back. Right. So kind of challenging your own beliefs. I have a big
question about that, but I think I'll let Joe go first.
Well, I'm sorry. I think you said you're a sex worker?
Yes, I am a sex worker.
Can you be more specific? Because that can mean many things, I feel like.
Yes. Okay. So I'll be super specific, but I actually have something I want to say first before we get too deep.
Please.
Absolutely.
So T, I want to thank you for giving me the space to come on this show and share my experiences, because this is actually going to be the first time I've ever talked about these things in detail in a public space.
Wow.
So
exclusive. Terrance, we have any exclusive music?
We have an exclusive. Music. I didn't know we were getting exclusive, but I'm super down for it.
I feel quite honored now.
Yeah. And, I've definitely talked about bits and pieces of my story with friends or other workers, but I'm sure there's going to be some things that are going to come up that I've never shared before. So I just want to thank you for that space. And also, obviously, T, if I had never worked in the clubs in New York, I would have never met Prima. And if I had never met Prima, I would have never met you. And so it's all just very serendipitous and cosmic.
Prima is
to me.
Corey for the listeners.
Oh, see, I didn't know if we were using names or not. So
yeah, no. We speak about her.
What
Prima
is
Corey? That's a nickname that Jay has for Corey.
Prima. Okay, we're already getting interesting.
It means cousin.
It means cousin in what, Spanish?
Yes, in Spanish.
Does it? Interesting.
Yeah.
Italian, it
does,
is
yeah.
not anything close to that.
Female cousin.
Prima is before in Italian. So, okay. Well, that's off to a good start. We're glad you joined us. I think this is gonna be
Absolutely.
good. But yeah, I guess yeah. What is a sex worker to you?
So, a sex worker is a really big umbrella term, and I'm actually going to quote Wikipedia, which I know is like not always the best source,
Yeah,
but
Wikipedia is great.
I
Is
love the
Bible.
way they explain it. So, basically, sex work is the exchange of sexual services, performances, or products for material compensation. It includes activities of direct physical contact between buyers and sellers, as well as indirect sexual stimulation. Sex work only refers to voluntary sexual transactions, thus, the term does not refer to human trafficking and other coerced or non consensual sexual transactions, such as child prostitution. The transaction must take place between consenting adults who are of the legal age and mental capacity to consent and must take place without any methods of coercion other than payment. I'm going to skip down a little bit to
Okay, so it's
types.
not. It wasn't against your will, is what we're
Yeah,
getting.
consent
Okay.
comes up a
Yes.
few
Thank
times in that.
Christ. Thank Christ.
Types of sex work include, but are not limited to, street prostitution, indoor prostitution, such as escort services, brothel work, massage parlor related prostitution, bar or casino prostitution, phone sex operation, exotic dancing, lap dancing, webcam modeling, pornographic film performing, and nude peep show performing.
That's so many things that you could be right now.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Just to say, like, I'm a sex worker.
This is
right?
why I asked. I've heard sex worker used in multiple ways. That's why I was like, which branch are you in?
So that's
We're
the
in, I
interesting
guess.
thing, right? Is that it can be very fluid or it can be very singular. There might be some people who just are quote dancers or quote strippers. There might be some people who are just phone sex operators. There might be some people who, I would even broaden this to include relationships like sugaring and girlfriend experience types of relationships.
Okay, we need to pause for a second. What is sugaring?
Is that like a
daddy?
sugar daddy, sugar baby situation? That's what it is?
Exactly, too. Exactly.
Sugaring. I'm learning so much already. His is great.
Sugaring. So all of these types of activities sort of fall under this umbrella term of sex work because there are similar labor ramifications for the types of conditions or the types of work environments that a worker would find him or herself or themselves in when they're engaging in this type of work. And so that's why for me, I just prefer that term because I would rather not create barriers within the industry because ultimately all of these types of work need to be validated as labor because that's what it is. I mean, we're laboring a product that is being, marketed or sold to a consumer in a capitalist society.
Sure.
Now, you just said sex worker, right? But like after you read that description and everything like that, I would kind of put it under hospitality umbrella.
Well, okay, can we just say what it is then? Because I'm still over here wondering what is you did.
So for me, I have dabbled in the dancing aspect, the lap dancing, erotic dancing, and I've also dabbled in what would be considered indoor prostitution in a way.
Okay.
And that was mostly conducted through the clubs themselves, which some clubs have, there's different types of clubs, and I can go into that. So in New York, for example, where I made the most of my money, those are called gown clubs, where you wear like a very expensive evening dress, you wear high, caliber jewelry, you may go eat dinner in the club with the client, and then you're doing mostly what's considered private rooms. Now, I am not by any means insinuating that everybody who works in that type of club is engaging in prostitution. I never engaged in it in the club itself. Right. But when you're meeting those types of clients, there can definitely be situations that arise where you may, engage those clients outside of the club at a later time. That's a huge difference, I would say, from like other clubs where I worked in Baltimore, which I would consider like I wouldn't say they're like booty clubs, because when I think of like a booty club, I think of like Atlanta or like Houston, and I never worked at like a booty club like that.
Now those booty clubs. Those are considered quote unquote strip clubs, right? There's a difference between strip clubs and what did you say, gown club?
A gown club, yes.
Right.
Yes,
There's a difference
yes
between those
and
two,
no.
right? No.
Yes and no,
Okay.
because in the gown club, you know, you still went on stage, you still performed, you still worked the floor, you still made money doing lap dances. It's not to suggest that that didn't occur, but the primary goal working in the gown club was to sell the room, because the room is a much larger profit for you than a lap dance or the stages. In fact, the club where I worked at the most in New York, we didn't even have a pole until I want to say like my second or third year working it. Like people would come in and they'd be like, is this a strip club? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, well, where's the pole? And I'm like, oh, we don't got that. We got rooms. And they're
We
like,
got
oh,
rooms. What?
yeah.
So wait, what's the room numbers? What are those numbers
What's the
like?
room numbers? What a
Like,
random,
what does it cost?
a
You
random-
know, like
oh,
what
the
are those?
cost. I thought you meant like
Yeah.
literally room 102.
No. I mean, like, what's it?
That makes
what's
more
the-
sense.
No, I thought that too. I'm like,
Yeah, I was like, who
number?
gives a shit about that? What a weird question. Yeah, so the cost the cost makes more sense, but I'm sorry. I need to know, maybe this is, I shouldn't be asking.
Joe's
You said-
baffled right now.
You said, no, I'm not baffled. I just need to know what we're talking about here. You said indoor prostitution. So is there's sexual acts going on in these, like you're going into a room, or are they still like lap dance type stuff?
It's going to vary. For me, I didn't, like I said, I never did sexual acts in the club, because even at that young, I was obviously younger then than I am now. This was in 2013 when I started doing this. I, at least at that age, as naive and silly as I was, I knew that the risk of getting busted and getting like a prostitution charge on my criminal record in New York City wasn't worth it. So for me, I just wouldn't take that chance. But there were definitely girls that I worked with who were definitely performing sexual services. And there were definitely clients who expected sexual services to be provided at that price point. For me, I made most of my money selling drugs in that
much
type
more
of
reputable
environment.
job.
Yeah.
Safer.
Because I mean, I thought it was safer at the time. You know, I can't objectively give you an answer on what would have been a better charge to have gotten at that point. I don't know what the laws were at that time.
Well, you know, no offense, no previous offense, and you know.
Were you selling
Italy.
Were you selling drugs for the club, or just out of your own personal thing?
Out of my own personal, like, because a lot of the clients.
Well, you're no different than Jay-Z then. That's an entrepreneur.
Right. And a lot of the
Exactly.
clients that you're getting are coming from out of town. You know, it's Midtown Manhattan. You're not going to get a lot of like locals. So you're getting a lot of guys from Australia, Europe, and they might be in town for a few nights. They don't know a drug dealer. They don't know like a corner guy. So they're coming to the strip club looking for drugs. And so you're able to make money as the dancer or the performer and get people to want to do private rooms because you're able to provide the drugs.
So I'm not counting your pockets here, but it looks like right now we're up to like maybe 2 to 3 streams of income.
Business is good, is what it sounds
Right?
like.
You know, like they say, in order to be a millionaire, you need multiple. So it looks like you're at like 2 to 3 right now. So you're on your way at that point, right?
Well, and that's what I mean about like why sex worker is such a better term, because like there are multiple streams of income, right? I'm not just making money from doing lap dances or doing rooms or, you know, moving cocaine. I'm making money doing a variety of different things.
Allegedly moving cocaine.
You know, it's funny. I don't know that I've ever seen cocaine in real life.
Allegedly.
That's sad, isn't it? Like, I feel like I should, at this point in my life, probably seen like hard drugs, but.
I mean, I'm surprised in New York City, they're ramped. They're everywhere.
It's everywhere, but
Yeah,
you know
but I don't go to like
Joe has
clubs or
not-
anything. Like maybe a
you know.
bar, but like I'm not going. What the fuck am I gonna do at a club? Like you
Joe's
don't know what I
the
look
reason
like, but
why
I am.
I'm able to kind of have like a good balance, because I was
I'm
able
the
to
good
be-
side. I'm the devil. on your
I was
shoulder.
able to be in certain aspects of that life, but still have a friend like you who is not. So like it was able to kind of like, you know,
Give you some
just
perspective.
balance. Yeah.
I'm
you
the
know,
devil. I'm the good one on his shoulder. I guess
maybe I shouldn't be still awake at 6 a.m. from no sleep.
That's just artist shit there, right there.
Well, and that's what I would say about, this type of lifestyle. Like, yes, you do have those multiple streams of income, but those multiple streams of income come with an expense of its own, right? So like you're never alive or awake during the day ever. Your entire lifetime is at nighttime. You don't have reported income in the same way that someone who works a regular job does. So you want to get an apartment, you want to buy a car, you want to do these different things. If they want to see pay stubs, you can't provide that.
Yeah.
So most likely you're having to put down a large deposit for, yes, because you're not able to show, hey, I make X amount of dollars every 2 weeks. And it does vary, right? I mean, there would be nights when you would go to the club and I would be in rooms all night long and it was great. There'd be other nights when I'd be lucky just to get, 10 lap dances. So it's more difficult than people think because it's not guaranteed in the same way that other types of labor are, which is why sex work in and of itself needs to be more legitimized as labor so that some of those barriers can be reduced, making it a little bit easier for people who do that kind of work to be able to lead I put huge quotes around this, the normal life. Because when you can't get an apartment, you can't buy a car, you can't, apply for these different programs and things like that, it still puts you at a social disadvantage, even if you're not necessarily at an economic disadvantage.
Interesting. That is an interesting thing to think about.
I'm sorry, Joe, not to cut you off.
No,
Jay, do you think there is a stigma that is around women in particular that work?
Oh, absolutely.
I line of work,
Absolutely.
And I mean that as far as like relationships, and then you spoke about like obviously like in society it's like to struggle just even like kind of getting an apartment, like the simple things that
that's because it was under the table, not so much because of
but even so, like like if you decide to get in a relationship with somebody and they're like, okay, well, what do you do or whatever, like do you use the term I'm a sex worker? Like do you say like, hey, like I'm an exotic dancer, like because I've dated dancers, so I know, and I'm accepting of it and everything like that. But there are some dudes I know that are just like, she's a hoe. Like, and it's just like, whoa, wait, that she doesn't even do that. Like, do she's actually in school? Like she majors in like 4 things. She has like 3 degrees.
Doctor, bro.
Like, and so like, do you think society is still putting that stigma on people that work in that industry? Like they're still holding it against them?
Of course. I mean, absolutely. And then I would even counter what you just said with like, okay, like what's wrong with being a hoe? Like, why is that? Like, we have to change the way that we see sex, and the way we see people who enjoy sex or who sell sex, because we have these ideas that like, okay, like if I'm married, then like sex is good. But like if I'm making money off of sex, then like it's bad. And this is my perspective and the sex worker perspective, I would say that is shared more so in like the academic spaces where we research like, trends in sex work and things like that. And it's like, ultimately the stigma comes down to sex. And because women are seen as the quote less dominant sex, or gender, I should say gender is a more appropriate term. We are the ones who bear like all the stigma, right? So it's like take sex work completely out of it and it's like, oh, you lost your virginity when you were 15, like, oh, you're a hoe, or like, oh, you had sex with some guy you don't know, like you're a hoe. Like nobody says that about like men, right? Like nobody's like, oh, like
I used to say that about a friend of mine all the time, but
absolutely.
No, but what did we say last week?
Right. Sex is overrated, right? If you're under like that was
well,
my
you
process.
were a little
sex
harder
is overrated
than me. I was more like sex is great. It's just not like this life.
I think it was over. Yeah, right. At a certain age, like for those that are kind of like oh, I need to lose my virginity and things like that or whatever, it's overrated at a certain age. After that, it's kind of like it's your body, it's your choice.
I will say you do bring up a good point about how we should get rid of that stigma, because our society is so like a Christian Protestant. It's like you can't have sex with anyone until you get married, and it's just like it's a stigmatized if you love just to have sex, and that is just kind of bullshit because pretty much everyone loves to have sex.
Yeah, and I mean the reality is that people pay for sex too. Like people don't want to acknowledge that even within like feminist spaces. they want to demonize, the men. They're like, oh, if we could just punish the men and stop the men from buying sex, then like all the problems would go away. And it's like,
one
well,
of
there's
the
nothing
oldest
wrong.
industries ever.
Oldest industry.
Yeah.
Well, Terrance, have you ever paid for sex?
Not directly.
What does that mean? I'm not talking about a steak dinner paying. I'm talking about like you give her money to have sex with you.
Not directly, no.
I mean, I don't know, you keep
Not
saying not directly. Like
I'm saying not directly because you indirectly pay for sex sometimes. I've spent money on buying bottles so I could sleep with a girl for the night.
That's not the question.
I've done that. But it's essentially that's what I'm doing, right?
Well, no, it's not, because you could buy that money, you could spend that money on those bottles and it leads to nothing. If you go to a prostitute and say, I would like to have sex with you for this money, I mean, you're getting your product.
I guess, but I have a motive behind what I'm doing.
So I would throw in the gray area, but like, what about a sugaring relationship, right? Like, not every person in a sugar relationship is having sex with the sugar daddy and vice versa. So, but isn't the implication that if I'm, paying your bills or buying you expensive things, that you're going to have sex with me at some point? I think it's a huge gray area. There's no, and that's what it really boils down to. Yes, the gray area. But you brought up an interesting point, T, about dating. And so my opinion on it has always been that I don't date while I'm working. That's just my prerogative.
Really?
Wait, so if you're a dancer, you're a sex worker, during the times you're employed, quote unquote, is doing that, no relationships.
No relationships, no romantic relationships of any kind.
So Jay, you're saying like if I'm working in this industry for however long I may be working, I'm not having a relationship.
No,
that's what you're saying.
No, absolutely not. That was my prerogative. And for me, and I'm putting this out there as opinion only, like opinion warning right now. Mm-hmm. To me, I don't believe that it's really possible to do that in a healthy way, because the two outcomes that I have always seen are that either one, the guy is okay with it and encouraging of it, in which case he's using the worker for his own benefit. So I've had situations where I've worked with girls who, I had one girl in particular. I remember it was a Valentine's Day night, and I went to work because I ain't had no man, and she did have a man, and they went to dinner, they, went in the tub, they had sex, he bought her all this stuff. She's thinking she's going to have this romantic Valentine's Day night. And then it gets to be about 10 o'clock and he's like, so, you're going to work tonight, right? And so she comes to the club and she's like all hurt because she's like, I can't believe he like made me come to work tonight. And it's like, yeah.
Who was this guy? Was he
her romantic partner at the time?
But did he work there? What is it? What?
No, he didn't work there.
So why does he care about?
Yeah, that doesn't. Yeah, I'm trying to like.
Why was he like? Well, you're at work now, so like I wouldn't. What's that?
Because
about?
they lived together, and they were using her earnings to pay their rent.
Breadwinner.
How the fuck do guys find women like this who just do everything they want? Fuck me.
It's a manipulation thing.
He was also one of our suppliers for drugs. So he was helping. So she was pushing it to some of the rest of us as well.
Sounds like a winner.
She was the plug. She was the plug.
So that's scenario one. And then scenario two would be the one that T brought up, which is like guys will try to save you, right? Like I had a relationship after I started dancing.
That was me.
Nah, I was never this guy. Fuck that.
Yeah, I was Captain Save a Ho. No, I'm sorry, not ho, but I'm sorry.
Nothing wrong with
it. There's nothing wrong with being a hoe.
He's saying you can use the word hoe, but there's nothing wrong with it. It's just what it is.
Captain Save a Sex Worker? Is that what we're saying?
Hoe is fine. Hoe is fine. We're taking that term back, Terrance.
We're taking it back.
Hoe is becoming. It's just, hey, you like to have sex. That's all it means. It's not a bad thing.
Is hoe okay? Hoe can't be okay. It can't be okay.
Listening to the conversation, Terrance? I feel like you're
not
really.
It just makes me. I'm sorry, Jay. It just makes me feel bad to just be like, that's okay to say like, oh, I mean, look, when you take back something, it gives you more power, right? So I'm completely understanding of that. I guess it's
just someone who likes to have sex, and does have sex. I say like a lot of sex. What's wrong with that?
It comes down to terms, right? So like we live in a society now where everyone is a lot more conscious of the terms that they use and how the different ways we name things or call things can either uplift groups of people or can vilify or demonize groups of people, right?
Yeah.
And so when it comes to this industry, I would give this person the same advice that I give any other movement, right? Like, for example, if a trans person wants to be called trans, call them trans. Don't call them some other term that they don't want to be called. If a dancer wants to be called a dancer and not a stripper, call her a dancer because that's what she wants to be called. At the end of the day, we all get to choose what we want to be called or what we want to be, I hate to use the word labeled, but what you want to say about yourself, right? And so like for me, saying that I'm a sex worker, that's me. But there may be lots of other people who work in my industry who don't want to use that term. And that's fine. I'm not here to like put my term onto everybody else. I've just adopted that term because I like the way, like I said, it encapsulates so many different identities, because that's really what it boils down to, right? Like I think people sometimes oversimplify it. They're like, oh, I mean, like, you just like take off your clothes for money. Like, how hard is that? Like, that's like so easy. And it's like,
first of all, you don't have the body for this and doesn't look good for you. So yeah.
But it's like, it's so much more than that, right? Like, yeah, I was a dancer or a stripper or an exotic entertainer, whatever. But like, I was also a girlfriend. I was a therapist. I was a drug dealer. I was a comedian. I was a divorce attorney. Like,
whoa, wait,
I was a financial advisor. I was like a emotional support system. Like, I was a spiritual counselor. Like, there's so much emotional and psychological labor that goes into this type of work that I think that people oversimplify the types of interactions that you're having with these, because you're interacting with people from all different types of like walks of life.
So Jay, look, I want to touch really quick back to the relationship aspect, right? Because I think there are a lot of men that don't understand like how hard sex workers, now I gotta kind of get comfortable saying that, right?
Actually, that's a good. Yeah, sorry, keep going. I was gonna say, what is the
that job is?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I wouldn't even just say men. I mean, I think that there's just people in general who just don't get it, because they can't see it maybe from like the client's perspective in a way, like, so you kind of reacted when I said divorce attorney. So, there would be guys who maybe they're in the middle of a divorce and they want like a female perspective on like their, wife or ex-wife's mind. And they can't ask her because they're at odds, and they can't ask any of her friends because all her friends think he's a piece of shit. And then, maybe their mom's dead already or something. And so like, who do you talk to? Right. I mean, it's like, you don't have anybody else to ask these.
Why would I pay for therapy when I can pay for titties and ass, right?
And
right. And I mean,
addition to that.
And I would argue that a therapist is a much more appropriate, like outlet for a lot of these things. But you have to also consider like the, inaccessibility of therapy, the stigma around going to therapy. For some people, going to a strip club or a brothel is more acceptable than going to see a therapist, which I know sounds insane, but that's just how our society, mental health in and of itself is something that has become a big buzz thing now. But, in 2013, almost 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, people weren't talking about it the way that they are now. We didn't have
definitely weren't
therapists and all that telehealth stuff. That stuff wasn't around yet. So you think about it, a lot of what sex workers have done, and like you mentioned earlier, it's an industry that has existed for thousands of years. A lot of it is that emotional. It's funny because I was just talking to a friend of mine who's a worker, and I was talking about how, I've never sugared, and like, we were just talking about that whole dynamic. And I was like, well, I mean, maybe I can do it. And she's like, but you have to be aware that that's even more emotional labor than what you're used to, because now you're dealing with somebody who wants companionship. They want a relationship. They want a long-term commitment from you, as opposed to somebody that's just coming into the club for the night and then going back to like the Ukraine next week or something like that.
So we can say sex workers were the first form of therapy.
I say yes.
We can date this back. This is proven now.
So
this is proven.
Well, Jaylynn, what was it? Like what did you have to go through that you would say to be this? Like obviously you have to keep yourself, I would assume, in good shape, but also like mentally, like what did it take? And like can you talk us through that a little bit, I guess? Because that's what I'm kind of interested in. Like a lot of people are.
So I was a pothead
Of course.
during that entire time. I mean, I
Kid Cudi.
smoked. Yeah, I smoked morning, noon, and night. Quitting cannabis is actually something I've been working on for the past year and a half or so.
Wow.
You would work on it when it's legal almost everywhere now, right? Like that's
Yeah,
when
but
you would decide.
alcohol
Like,
is
let's
legal, but
quit.
some people still get like hooked in on alcohol. So.
Let me not do this when everyone is allowing it to be okay now.
That's the point, man. It's not cool anymore. You know, you're like, oh, well, I guess
Right,
that's what
exactly.
it is.
Yeah, right.
That's
Cops are fine with it. Fuck this own.
I'm not like the cool, like, you know, stoner girl anymore. Like everybody's a stoner. So.
Yeah, like your mom is smoking. You're like,
Yeah.
oh,
It's like
whatever.
I can get this at the corner store.
Yeah, literally, you get at the corner. So
It's like Facebook. Everybody's on Facebook. It's like, oh God, I'll
Facebook's
never be
lame.
caught dead there. Yeah.
Facebook's lame. TikTok will be there soon.
Can't be there.
But no, I mean, you know, at that time in my life, so I guess I could talk a little bit about too, like how I got into it, because I think that that is relevant. So
That's super important, actually. And I only say that because do you know about the show? Joe, you probably don't know about this, but Jay, do you know about the show P-Valley?
loved it. Loved it.
Right? It was a great
Loved
show.
it.
But the reason why I think that's important because one of the main characters on P-Valley, she's running away from something, right? And she went to the club and kind of just was able to use that as leverage. But then you have another character in there that is in an abusive relationship, and this is where she finds her freedom as far as like being in the club and being on stage or whatever. And then there's another that is there, and this is where she's using this as a leverage for life. Like, this is going to help me get out of this situation. Like, I'm only doing this for a means to an end, you know? So that's why I think that that's like super important, because a lot of people are just seeing this from what, you know, the TV are showing them, or like you know, like what is it, the VH1 reality shows and things like that, but they don't actually know, like, you know, hey, like, this is why I did it. And I can say that because like I dated someone, like, and literally her reason for, you know, continuing to be a sex worker was I made so much in one night that it was just like, I'm never going to work a regular job again. That was it. It wasn't like I had daddy issues or anything like that. It was like, I made so much money doing something for 2 hours that it was no way I was ever going to work a 9 to 5 ever again. And that was it.
And I think that that brings up a really good point to keep in mind about the reasons why we can't generalize why someone does sex work, because there is such a variety of reasons. And a lot of times people like to harp up the like, oh, she had no other choice, or, you know, she's running away. And I was running away from something. So we can talk about that in a minute. But ultimately, I think it comes down to the best choice for that individual at that point in time. So a lot of sex workers are migrant workers. They could be documented or undocumented. And so for them, they're moving to a new place and trying to start a new life. And maybe this is the best choice based on the papers they may or may not have, the connections they may or may not have. There's other people like my roommate in New York at the time who she had a full-time job as an accountant on Wall Street. And she did this for side money so that her and her boyfriend could travel to like Croatia on the weekends, right?
Wow.
Then there's some people who just like the flexibility, which is also a little bit about myself too, because I liked not being on a schedule. I liked being able to show up at different clubs in different cities and work when I wanted and not be, you know, hammered into this strict schedule. That appeals to a lot of mothers who have young kids who can't, you know, work during the day because they have to be up taking care of the kids, people who are disabled and aren't able to maybe travel, you know, or sit at a desk all day. There's a variety of different reasons why people would go into it, but ultimately it's the best option. I mean, like you said, what other job am I going to get where I can make $4,000 in a night? You know, like you said, in 5 hours, 6 hours.
Okay, I think we're getting all over the place.
Can we divide that?
No. Before we get to that, I'm sure that I got brought up. How did you get involved?
So for me, So in my senior year of college, I had two kind of like bad things happen to me at the same time. So one of them was a romantic relationship, which I don't like to talk about in too much detail, but it was bad. Like it was really bad.
Okay.
And that relationship ended. And around that same time, I also got arrested and charged with drug related charges, cannabis related charges. And so they weren't serious charges. They were my first offense, but coming out of like literally that happening, coming as I'm coming out of college made it really hard for me to find jobs because I'm applying to jobs and not disclosing that information. They're finding it out and being like, well, why didn't you disclose us? Disclose this. You're disqualified. Or I'm going into jobs and being honest about it, and they're not hiring me because we're like, we have a criminal record, right?
Yeah.
So it was really hard to find a job. And around that time, I was still living back home in the DC area where I'm from. And I was just, having a really tough time. And a friend of mine, well, I wouldn't call him a friend. Yeah, stadium. I never worked. See, I can't work anywhere in DC because if my dad fucking shows up, it's over.
Oh my Christ!
I couldn't even imagine.
Wait, that's a whole nother thing right
there. That's a plot of a movie or something.
Jesus. Like the last thing I need, my dad frequents Houston and DC, so I could not work in either of those cities. If my dad or my uncle or my nephews or any of them, like my nephews. So wait, nobody knows. Nephews, people do know. But at that time when I was doing it, are we allowed
to put this out, Jay? I don't want to put this out and someone comes across controversy
or something.
You know what I mean? Like I don't want to do that.
Well, that's why I said that I'm thankful for you in this space because I do want to be honest. I think it's time that I open up about this because I think that one, a lot more people have been through what I've been through. And by us being more open and honest, we can help to normalize this culture because ultimately that's what we want, right? Like I want to be able to talk about my life and it be okay. Like I was on a sex worker panel out here in Vegas a couple of months ago. And one of the workers who does street-based work was like, I just want to be treated normally. Like one of the biggest anxieties that I used to have when I was working was that I would shut myself off from like social interactions because I was terrified of the question of, well, what do you do? Like when you're at happy hour and everybody's like, so like, what do you do? Like that interaction in of itself was like debilitating anxiety for me because I'm like, I can't tell people what I do. So now I'm like making up these random like stories about like where I do work or don't work. And like, I'm sure people could kind of pick up like, okay, like it's just a really weird space to be in. And like, ultimately I want people to be able to talk about that.
We're going to get back to like why you got into it, but I got to ask this. What was like the best career you lied about when someone asks like, what do you do?
She's like, I'm an astronaut, actually. I work for NASA.
What was like the best one you say? Like, I could just imagine, because you can, at this point, you can come up with anything. It doesn't matter because it's just a lie. Like,
unless of course you're like, oh, I work in philosophy. I teach, and they're like, oh, me too. And you're like, oh, fuck.
Well, right. That's the thing. You have to be careful because you don't know if someone's going to call your bluff or like ask deeper questions. So to be honest, I never said anything too crazy, but I would just say like, you brought up food service and retail earlier, which I think is an important connection to make because it is close to those industries. So I would say like, oh, I'm a waitress at Hooters or I'm a waitress here, which I would do that type of stuff too, right? Like I would safe. Waitress, I would do promotional modeling or like, things like that. But even those industries in and of itself, there's some stigma once you get to a certain age and everybody else is like, I don't know, college professors or accountants or blah, blah, blah. And they're like, oh, you work at like Sonic. Okay. Like, or you work at the mall. Like, okay. There's like all this stigma about you not being in a certain place that society says that you're supposed to be, or you didn't follow a certain path. So, and I mean, and some of that I know is my own internalized insecurity, which is things that I have to work on.
You're not wrong about that. There are a lot of people who are like that. Like if you don't have a specific kind of a job, or if you just say, if said you were a sex worker, a lot of people would be like, oh, what? So.
Right. And the point that the girl on the panel made was she was like, you guys talk about your jobs all fucking day. I just want to have the space to be able to talk about my job and it be okay. And that's why I think it's important for me and other people who are comfortable coming out and talking about our experiences to do so, because ultimately we just want to normalize it and make it safer for us to be, because when you keep an industry in the dark, which is why I like to bring up, my past involvement with like the drug industry, because that's another thing that when you're keeping it in the dark, you're opening yourself up to a lot more risk, because now you're having to hide, you're having to conceal, you're having to go through these lengths that put you as the worker or the seller at risk, when like, if we could just be honest about what's going on, it would break away a lot of the criminalization, a lot of the negativity that we experience in all of these Black market industries. And then on top of that, it's extremely hypocritical that like, I can't sell my body, but like some rich guy can sell, products that have been made with child labor in like Miramar. And like, that's okay.
It's a good
Nike,
like,
we're talking about you.
Like, or like I can ship items all across the continental US and the world globally, but I don't want to pay my workers a decent livable wage. I don't allow my workers to use the restroom. Like, that's applauded in our society, but an individual can't like sell their, and it's not even like selling your body, it's like selling your femininity, or like selling your presence, like your vibe. Like, I can't sell that. Or like, I can't sell weed on the street, but y'all can sell opioids in a doctor's office. Like, that's the type of stuff that we need to be more aware of. And that's why people need to be able to come forward and, share their stories.
Okay, so is there a specific...
I'm sorry, it deserved a round of applause. It deserved a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jaylynn, is there like a specific story or something you would want to talk about right now?
Well, I'll go back to how I got into it, and then there'll probably be some stories that'll come out of that. So it was really hard for me to find a job at that time. So I was, super depressed because I'm a recent college grad. I can't get a job, like blah, blah, blah. And I just gone through this bad breakup.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's not like just gloss over that.
College grad, yes, point. 4 years, undergraduate degree. So, but getting a criminal record can screw your life up. I mean, we could have a whole different podcast episode on how hard it is to get opportunities. And what's crazy is that cannabis got like decriminalized in Washington, D.C. the year after I got arrested. So had it been a year later, I wouldn't have even had that problem. But at that time, you had to basically go through a process to get your records sealed so that employers and, landlords, everybody can't see it. And that takes about 18 months. So from the time you go to your first court date for 18 months after that, like, that's on your record. So long story short, a friend or an acquaintance of mine actually like randomly contacted me the same day I was like going through it. And I was like, you know what? I just want to get out of DC. My ex was still in DC. I just was like, I don't want to be here anymore. I want to go somewhere else. So I migrated, like a lot of other sex workers do, to New York. And this acquaintance at the time, he had a nightclub in Meatpacking District in the Gansevoort area. And so I thought that I was going to be working at the nightclub. Like when he was like, oh yeah, come to New York, I got you, like you got a job, like no worries. I'm thinking I'm going to be working in the nightclub. But like y'all New Yorkers, y'all are like straight hustlers. Like,
the swindle was real.
Y'all swindle is real. So anyway, I get to New York and he's like, oh no, like we're actually not hiring at the nightclub. We're hiring at like this other company that I run. It's like this warehouse up in the Bronx. You're going to be like the secretary. So I was like, okay, well, it's better than like no job, like fuck it. I was living in Midtown.
Kind
but
of
I
a
was
douchey
like,
thing to do, but yeah.
And it actually, what it's technically called, which is something I just learned about myself. I would recommend this book called Revolting Prostitutes to anybody who's listening who wants to learn more about like sex work and its relationship to trafficking and labor trafficking, because a lot of times people think that like trafficking is only like sex trafficking or like children being like abducted. And like, actually, it's more likely that people get labor trafficked, which is like, say you're in one place and someone's like, hey, I'm going to get you a job in the US, or I'm going to get you a job in Abu Dhabi or in London, and you're going to be doing X, Y, Z. And then like you get there and they're like, oh, psych, you're not actually doing that. You're doing this instead. Now you're in this foreign city or this foreign place and you don't know anybody else. And so you have to accept this job that you're being given. And there's stories of people taking like people's passports and like not allowing them to lick. There's all types of, and that's way more common than people think it is. And that's essentially what happened to me, because I went there with one impression of where I was going to be working. And then when I got there, the situation was totally different.
So it wasn't a choice at first.
You know what's funny? Well, not funny, but what's interesting about that you were just saying, that's in a sense, that's kind of how slavery started. Not that we have to dive into
Yes.
this, but it was started with being indentured servants on false pretenses of America, and then it slowly spun into the slave trade. But anyway.
No, I mean,
Thank you for that.
Capitalism is essentially like the exploitation of free or cheap labor. So you're trying to get people to labor for your profit for as little cost to you as you possibly can.
Yeah, slavery technically comes from the plantation, is where it like originated from. Like the same amount of people in like 1790 were working, in like 1860 on the plantation, but they were doing like 5 times the work.
Mm-hmm.
So it all comes from that. But anyway,
and if you think about our current immigration crisis, right? And like how people will come here and work for so much less than what the average American would work, and they have no rights or no bargaining power, really. So it's all tied together. And so what this person basically did was at the time, I didn't know any of this, right? I'm just like a young, naive, like 21-year-old, just trying to, I don't know, figure shit out. So I started working at the job. And I hate to laugh about it because it's not funny, but it is in a way.
Laugh about it now.
My manager at the warehouse was like this 6'5" Dominican, like bald Dominican guy, right? And like he was super hot. Like I was not sexually attracted to him, but he was hot, right? So like you can acknowledge someone is hot and like not be attracted to them, right?
Sure. But is that a thing? Is that a thing?
Yes.
Can I say someone's attractive without being attractive to them?
Yeah.
Well, well, maybe let's say this. You can say someone's attractive without wanting to sleep with them, right?
Okay.
Like, see, Terrance doesn't understand that because a few shows ago, I said his girlfriend was beautiful, and he was like, "Whoa!"
I told him not to say that.
And I was like, I can't say that. I can't say something nice about her. Nope, absolutely. Can't say that in front of Terrance.
And I stand by it.
Yeah, and that's why you don't understand what she's saying because I'm acknowledging that your girlfriend is attractive. I stand by it. Not wanting to sleep with her, but that's not too much.
I stand by it.
Terrance, your toxicity is showing.
Thank you, Jaylynn. Thank you. Finally,
I don't care what either of you think about it. Okay, I don't give a damn.
All right, that we're gonna take a break there. That was the first half of it. It was a good one. It was a good one. I don't want to spoil everything you just heard. Well, you're gonna hear, I should say, because you already heard what you heard. But yeah, that was the first part. Like I said, tune in 1 week from today, April 10th, to hear the second part. And the second part is even better, I think, Terrance.
I think so. I think so. But just listening to that first part, oh my god,
a lot of good stuff. It's fascinating interview.
Oh man.
Once again, let's reiterate the old handles. If you want to reach out to us, if you want to reach out to us to mention something to Jaylynn, because she didn't, we can just tell her whatever you want or whatever it is. Terrance, hit him with the Twitter handle.
Yeah, you can hit us on Twitter at Need I Say More Pod. If you just want to interact with us a little bit more directly.
Yeah, follow us there.
Just email us at Need I Say More Podcast at gmail.com.
No, same thing. Need I Say More Pod.
Need I Say More Pod
at Gmail.
I would be the one to mess it up, right?
I mean, it's the same as the Twitter handle. So
I know. I would be the one to mess it up.
It would
right?
be you, yeah.
Need I Say More Pod at gmail.com.
Nailed it. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, tune in next week for the second half of this very special, what do we call this, Terrance? So, you know what? You've already seen what it's called. You don't need us to tell you, but it's going to be called More to Say. That's that's the spinoff of the main series.
We've been asking ever since we started this. Need I say more? And Jaylynn had more to say.
He did have more to say, indeed, as you just heard. So we'll see you next week.